Williams out, Sheehan for now. No signposts of where we go next. The Swansea way, important or a relic of the past? An ugly defeat at Stoke pelters to the players and coaches as Williams arrived dressed as the Grim Reaper for what would prove to be the funeral of his Swansea reign. The long-awaited fans forum, postponed. We have a game on Saturday, in case anyone remembered that. We'll preview that, we'll talk who next, and we'll analyse where it all went wrong. All that and more on today's Only Swans Podcast. So, Carwyn, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not so bad. Excited to be sort of getting this going, really. So, usually we're gonna get this sort of going with audience questions, and we're gonna do this every 2 weeks. We're gonna carry on doing the spaces as well. Although we're gonna, as you said, we do this every 2 weeks. Although we may reconvene sooner if a new man is in post by that point. So, should we start with the big news that broke yesterday afternoon? So we're recording this on Tuesday. So. It was yesterday afternoon, it all started to appear about 4 o'clock that Luke Williams was on his way out of Swansea City. Right decision, yes?
Yeah, well, I suppose you look at the results and it is the right decision. Maybe, I'd put into question whether or not Alan Sheehan is the right man to take over from him. At the end of the day, you're replacing, probably a poor manager with a man with no experience who could well also be poor. We got to see, 7 games under him previously, and it wasn't anything special. He was apologising after victories for the style of play we were playing, which, realistically says enough about what, we're in for.
There's that crazy video, isn't there, of Sheehan doing the three
after
fist bumps and then
wasn't
apologising to the fans, yeah. But, 8 defeats in the last 10, it couldn't go on like this, could it?
No, I think it was, a decision that had to happen. I think, realistically, he's the only manager in Swansea City history who will be sacked and wished well.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard because a lot of people do like Luke Williams just for his character alone and just him as a man. He is, to many, even just a month ago, he was the one to lead us forward. Of course, now it's going to be a bit strange seeing him, sacked.
I've never seen a situation really where a manager has so quickly gone from talk of him being poached to the sack. It just seems it's very quick and a sign of how quickly it's unravelled, really. Saw on Twitter yesterday, Stuart James suggests that in just 7 weeks we've gone from the brink of the playoffs to battling against relegation, and I think we're lucky, really, in many ways, that the teams below us are so bad.
Well, it is exactly that, isn't it, to be honest? You look back at the end of December, we all thought we would be pushing up there. I honestly thought we'd finish maybe just outside of the playoffs, but still within that sort of 10th to 6th position. And now, as you said, we are very lucky that the Plymouths of the world exist in the Championship this season, or there is a good chance we could go down.
There is a chance. I don't think we will. I'm less confident with Alan Sheehan in charge than I think if we went out and got a new man. I think, I would like to see a new man. I'm sure we all would. But I think it all went wrong for Luke Williams, really, you could argue, at the beginning of January when the news around West Brom broke. How much of an impact would you say that had on what ended up happening?
Well, we discussed it a lot, didn't we? We spoke about it on the space, etc. And it had detrimental effect on him and his Swansea City career and the players. You could see it on the pitch from that Portsmouth game onwards where it really started to heat up and we really thought he was going to leave. We just didn't look like the same team anymore, and then that spiralled and we are where we are now.
And I think you can say that the comments he made didn't help himself, and he was very naive in the way he handled things, and perhaps it's a lesson to him, really. I think he will take this forward, that you never bite the hand that feeds you. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's all gone so wrong after that. We have, obviously, Matt Grimes has now left, but we had Luke Williams was a key part in that presentation to Ben Cabango to stay on. And then, 2 weeks later, he was flirting with another job. It kind of, you can see why the players would be upset by the way he handled it.
It was a really odd situation, wasn't it, really? It just sort of came out of nowhere, and then you sort of hope that when you see a link, you're like, you'll just dash that instantly. And then you watch the press conference and he's, not denying it whatsoever. He's literally practically selling himself for that job, and I think that's where it hit a lot of fans hard.
And there was that comment about, well, they're not going to want me after this anyway.
That was terrible.
And after an insult,
that is the worst.
Yeah,
after a
4-0 defeat at Portsmouth, it was pretty bad, really. I also think as well, part of the problem was, I mean, we must not forget that just 6 weeks ago, he was being linked with these bigger jobs, and I think he did make almost a bit of a rod for his own back in many ways, because he did so well, I think, in the first half of the season, overperformed with what I believe to be quite a poor group of players. And it's almost as if when it was regressed to the mean, it was always going to be tough for him to keep that level of performance up. But the problem is, this is a poor squad performing even poorer than I think their levels.
I think there's no sugarcoating it, is there? This squad ultimately, I've said it a few times, is probably in the position where it should be. Really, we aren't really underperforming. I'm seeing a lot of people pretty naively suggesting things like, we could go up there under a new manager. We could be back up in those playoff positions, around there, sort of like when Russ rejuvenated us and we ended up, 3 points from the playoffs. But
no,
this isn't that squad's level. This is the worst Swansea squad in years.
Yeah, it's the worst Swansea squad I've seen since my first real memory of watching the Swans, full disclosure, is at Wembley. So that's the first memory I really have, and it's undoubtedly the first time now I'm talking about the playoff final, is obviously, and it's the worst squad I've seen watching the Swans without a doubt.
I just can't pick out much quality from it, and I think that's not to say I don't like the squad. I like a lot of the players we have, but if you're being realistic and talking from a fan perspective and just a general football perspective, this squad isn't very good.
No, and I don't necessarily blame a lot of them. I think they've been put in a tough position, but at the same time, this is a squad lacking belief, and I think that is ultimately, when that's the case, and you have a manager who's probably walking in defeated every day to training, that the time is definitely right for a change at that point. And I'm glad we've seen it that way. But I think now is also probably the right time for a change. If you look at the next couple of weeks, I mean, we had a fans forum that was meant to take place. We'll move on to that in a bit, but I think with that sort of looming, as well as 2 weeks off after the Blackburn game, I think now is the right time for a change. So who next, I suppose, is the next question, really. I mean, the names we've had most closely linked so far have been Des Buckingham, who's now seems to have been dismissed as one of the candidates. We've also seen Rob Edwards, Ryan Mason and George Boateng, who I saw a Blackburn account said to us his agent must be busy at work at the moment because he's also been heavily linked with the vacant Blackburn job. I can't see either of Mason or Boateng at the moment, to be honest.
No, I think they're a bit
Who would you say, what do you think of the candidates linked, and who would be your top three choices?
So the other one in that article was obviously Rob Edwards. Yeah. And I'm quite a big fan of Rob Edwards. Despite questions maybe being asked about his football at Luton, at the end of the day, the football he was playing was pretty much just because of a system that he'd inherited. He was playing the Jones way because that is what the players knew. Yeah. If you go look back at their Forest Green team, he was playing pretty good football. He used the wings very well. They were a very well-drilled side.
And I think a Rob Edwards team, what I would say is sort of the key characterisations of that is flying wing-backs and energy in midfield. And I think if you looked at our squad currently, those are probably the two areas you'd have to argue are strongest, really. I think we've got a real energy in midfield. O'Brien, Franco, Cooper, they can all bring that in abundance. And I think Key and Timon, if they had three centre-backs behind them and were given licence to bomb on, I think they could be really dangerous, as we've seen with Edwards' teams before with his wing-backs.
Well, I think someone like Edwards needs athletes because, it's high intensity, it's high press, and there's a lot going on with the way they play, and we are probably lacking one or two athletes, especially in wide areas.
Yeah, definitely. Who would you personally have as your top three candidates?
Well, I'm sort of toying between a few at the moment. I mean, it's so early and I'm not really expecting anybody. But I'd say right now, Rob Edwards is up there for me. I don't see, a much better fit at the end of the day. He's Welsh. He's got a lot of experience in the Championship. He took a team up, a year ago. Whether or not currently his stocks are low, I think it's definitely one that we should be looking at. Your thread, obviously you discussed Rene Maric, What do you think of him? Because I would put him quite highly on my list.
I would like us to go down that sort of route, and I think that sort of young, inexperienced coach has served us well in the past. And we've done well looking abroad in the past with Potter and Laudrup. But I think perhaps in the situation we're in at the moment, where there are sort of a more steady, experienced coach might be I mean, I'm not saying, let's drag in Hodgson or Allardyce. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But somebody who has managed at the level before, like Rob Edwards, he would be one of my top three certainly as well.
I think it massively depends on when you expect us to make the appointment. Currently, I'm sort of looking in the summer because I do fully think that we could well sit here for 13 games with Sheehan and move forward.
And that does worry me, I would say. I don't think we saw anything, and I've said sort of in our notes here of like, I don't believe Sheehan should be considered under any circumstances, really. I don't think he's the man for the job. He's shown before that he does not play a style of football that aligns closely with the Swansea way. But he will be in the frame. There's no doubt about that, even if that isn't the right decision. I think for me, I'd like Edwards a lot. I think he'd be a good fit for the current squad we have, even if not necessarily the best fit for what we would see as the Swansea way in the past. But ultimately, without Grimes, without a possession-based manager, I'm not sure whether we are in a position to be doing that at the moment. If that was the route we were going to carry on taking, I'd like us to look at Des Buckingham. I know you disagree. You're not quite such a fan. And I like David Wagner as well. I haven't seen his name mentioned yet, but I think he would be a really good candidate. Did a good job with Norwich and Huddersfield and brings that sort of high-intensity style that I think could work quite well with some of our players.
I just think the main difference between our opinions here is that I wouldn't really mind taking a risk. I know it seems bold, but I'm just bored of us sitting season upon season with, the same basic British manager who tries to play good football, even if they aren't quite, there yet in terms of tactical nous, etc. If they're eventually going to get there, they will get to that top pinnacle manager. I'm bored of talking about that. I would be a massive fan, and I've told you this many times now, of us going abroad, looking for someone with different ideas, that they've learned from managing abroad and transition them over to here. We've seen it with Cifuentes at QPR. We've seen it with Danny Roll at Sheffield Wednesday. I don't see why we couldn't take that risk like they did.
But do you not feel as if the current position we're in, I know they were obviously in a very risky position as well, but I mean, Roll was appointed October time. I think Cifuentes was appointed November time. I mean, we're a lot later into the season and ultimately we are not in a good position. I worry about taking that level of risk at the moment, and I think, I mean, of course, I think we could argue about it until the cows come home, and whether, in that case, I think maybe I wouldn't do it, but you probably do look to go with Sheehan until the summer if you are going to go for that sort of appointment.
Well, that's sort of what I'm basing it off. I'm just assuming that Sheehan could be here till the summer, but regardless, I think we're in a position right now, if we were to appoint a manager tomorrow, I think we're fine. I think, maybe it's a bit of a risk. We aren't completely safe. I'll happily say we're nowhere near completely safe. But, there are 8 points between us and the drop. You'd be shocked if we don't pick up a few points just from a new manager bounce or from, Sheehan, bit of luck. He got some good results when he managed last time.
Admittedly, I think with a far stronger squad than he did.
For sure. But, I don't see it as taking, it would be taking a risk regardless, bringing in a young coach. But I don't think there's too much of an increased risk.
No, and I'm not suggesting that bringing in someone like Buckingham would be risk-free. I think if I was Andy Coleman making the decision right now, I'd be looking to get Rob Edwards down here, I think. I mean, whether he, as I say, fits the Swansea way, I'm not 100% sure, but do you think the candidate necessarily should?
No, I think it doesn't really have to. I'm not 100% saying stray away from the Swansea way. I want to see us playing good football. I want to see us playing football on the floor ultimately. But I think this idea that we all have of the Swansea way is sort of disjointed. No one really knows what the Swansea way is now. If you asked 100 fans what the Swansea way is, I doubt even more than 4 would come back with the same answer.
And that is a bit of a problem, isn't it? Is we have this sort of increasingly vague concept of what the Swansea way is. You'd argue, you'd hear from some people, it's what Russell Martin did, and then you'd hear from other people, it's what Michael Laudrup did, and ultimately those are not the same goals that they were working with, and I think there is a sort of vagueness as to what the Swansea way necessarily involves. I would like us to try and stick with playing football the right way, playing football on the floor, not necessarily as hyper focused on possession as we have been under Martin or Williams. I would like to see us play a bit quicker. But I do think there should be a focus on looking to.
I think that's what the base level of the Swansea way is. You play the ball on the floor, you sort of look to control possession, but it's not. Right now, I don't think what we've played in the last few years has been the Swansea way. I think the Swansea way was about keeping possession, but I don't think it was, hitting 70s, hitting 75%. That is hyper possession. So, we've slightly strayed away from it, maybe.
And that's an extreme that I mean, Luke Williams has in many ways been trying to play it, is an extreme which I'm not sure necessarily works with these group of players, especially doesn't necessarily work with Matt Grimes. And I mean, there's a reason we've been losing every week at the moment. I would say with Edwards, I think a lot of people will base Edwards off his spell at Luton when, as you said, he inherited a squad that played a certain way, inherited Nathan Jones' squad, so it was always going to be a bit route one, a bit direct. But I think when he's given licence, and in the summer perhaps licence himself to really go out and get his sorts of players, I think it would be quite a bit more akin to what we'd like to see from a Swansea team. And I think he'd understand the club he was walking into. One thing I would like us to consider, which we haven't mentioned yet, is I would like someone who's got a real character about them and is an excellent communicator, because I think the last two managers, I think Luke Williams and Duff, have both had their issues in that, admittedly, just both in different ways. Yeah,
I think Duff was just very naive, and Luke Williams is, as we've said, a fantastic character, but ultimately he's not well media trained. He's sort of just come into the game out of nowhere in the last few years, so of course he's not going to be fantastic in the media. He's not like Russell Martin, who's had to do press conferences all of his career, as the captain of Norwich. So that is the major difference.
You could tell that when he spoke, and he sort of high-profile gaffes, really, such as when he said that Carl Rushworth would be definitely with us next season, and that obviously wasn't the case. The West Brom thing, of course. I mean, and I think somebody who really communicates their ideas to the fans, and you almost look forward to seeing a bit of passion in press conferences. Basically, what I'm saying is a sort of Russell Martin type character in that regard, and I think Edwards could be that, and I think Buckingham is a bit like that as well. We need someone who is a good communicator, because ultimately that sort of thing fosters a connection with the fans.
And look, if we're being realistic, we don't have a time machine. We don't know what's going to happen in the summer or what's going to happen next season. But let's just say, we're sort of mid-table area realistically as just a early guess. You need a manager who can just up the spirits, because I said it the other day, when we used to lose under Russell Martin, it didn't affect me too much. I wasn't like, sad the next day really or anything, because you listen to his press conference, you'd be like, fair enough. He has really explained what happened there, what we're going to do better, how we're going to move forward.
You're buying into something wider under a manager like that.
Exactly. Whereas under Luke, you'd watch his press conference, you get very little from it, and you'd come away still as pissed off as you were after the game, ultimately, and that is the difference.
I would like to add on Des Buckingham as well, sort of what I think he could bring, and the fact that he's probably the most obvious sort of progression of the Swansea. I mean, reports say that he won't be taking the job, but we heard early reports before that Luke Williams wouldn't be taking the job. Ultimately, I just don't think anyone really knows at this stage, and Buckingham clearly has some admirers at the club, whatever that means, whoever they are. Now, he's someone who's a graduate of the City Football Group, which is obviously Manchester City, aligned closely with our way of thinking. He worked out for City Football Group in Mumbai, and it was from Mumbai that Oxford United decided to poach him. And I think his background in sort of youth football, coaching and development, I think would be an excellent fit for us. And he also talked of how important identity is to football clubs. When he played us this season, he talked about how much admiration he had for the Swansea way and the way we operated as a club. And I think that sort of character would be quite good to have around, really.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I mean, I've listened to a few of the things he said. I listened to his press conference earlier, actually, about the game against us. I'm just worrying again about, I don't know if we should be a bit more ambitious than Buckingham. I'm going to be honest, he was just sacked by Oxford a few months ago. Like, is that really where we're aiming? Sure, we've been here for a while. This is what our 6th managerial appointment in 6 years, pretty much. But should we be aiming higher than Des Buckingham, I think? To maybe steady the ship right now, I wouldn't hate it. But if this manager's going to be appointed in the summer, I think we could do better.
Only thing I would argue is I don't think this is a very attractive job right now.
I don't know. See, I've sort of teeter-tottered on this, thought about it quite a bit. But I really do think this job will always be slightly attractive, because there aren't many clubs, especially in the EFL, with a designated play style. Everyone knows the Swans should be playing good football, ball on the ground. If you can come here, semi-succeed, you're getting a good job.
Yeah, and I think that element will always exist of pre-Williams and Duff, isn't it? You look at how people have done after leaving here before. We had 3 managers before them who've all gone on to manage in the Premier League, and I think that will still have an appeal. I think you are looking at sort of at least an expectation of playing the right way, and that will appeal to the right sort of coach. But I wouldn't necessarily say I agree with you on Buckingham sort of steadying the ship. I think he is more of a sort of project.
Yeah,
type,
I suppose.
really.
I mean, he's only 40?
Yeah, he's still a very young manager, and would take a bit of time to get his style across. And the worry with that, obviously, is do we have that time at the moment, isn't it? But,
well, what is the difference in your mind between, say, him and somebody like René Maric?
I'd just say even if briefly he's got experience of English football, he's got a promotion in English football on his CV, and he's managed at the level before. And I mean, in René Maric's case, he has never managed at first team level.
Absolutely. Like, obviously, as you said in your thread, like, he was pretty instrumental in the Marco Rose teams of Mönchengladbach, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
Leipzig was, yeah. He was pretty instrumental in them, and he clearly has good ideologies about football, even though he's not really a footballing man to begin with. I can see where the risk factor comes in, but I don't think you can really base, a project manager like Des Buckingham off a playoff without context.
No, I know what you mean, and a lot of that team was built by Liam Manning.
Yeah, and I think if you go look at that whole season, they dropped off in form drastically. They picked up at the end, they got to the playoffs, and they won the playoffs.
They were brilliant in that playoff campaign.
Yeah, they were very good. I mean, and they were great in the final. I remember watching the final. But, I don't think that is sort of like a basis to say, a manager could succeed.
Yeah, I know. I do understand what you mean. Well, I mean, it feels ages ago now with all the news that's come out surrounding Luke Williams, but we did play at Stoke on Saturday. I mean, that in what would ultimately prove to be his final game in charge. What did you make of that fixture?
It was poor to watch, wasn't it? I can't help but feel bad for the fact that you travelled or anybody travelled to that game, because I just sat and watched it at home, and it was dross for me to watch. I couldn't imagine watching it in the ground.
Yeah, it was a dire game for the first hour. I mean, just an incredible lack of quality from both sides. I mean, I'd say it probably best summed up. I'm sure plenty of us have seen it. That cross that Ronald attempted when he fell over the ball and went out of play. That probably summed up the first hour of the game. Did then come into life. Then we scored a very, very scrappy goal. Josh Tymon against his former club. I mean, it was a complete howler at the back from them that gave us that goal, and I think the way. The amount we're asking of Tymon at the moment does worry me as well. I mean, it really sort of stuck with me in this game of he's just got nothing ahead of him, and he's being asked to just run himself into the ground.
Yeah, Tymon's putting in major cardio shifts for us at the moment. That's all that can be said. He just runs and runs and runs. And there were questions over him a few weeks ago, but him tracking back and stuff. But he is now being ran into the ground.
Yeah, and we talk about sort of various managers who'd come in and play wing backs. I think that could fit Josh Tymon really well, and Josh Key as well, who his omission from the team recently I find weird. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I thought he was really strange. Obviously, we're going back another game now, but Sheffield Wednesday, he's on the bench, and we bring Sam Parker on, who is still 18, 19 years old. 18,
and then was out the squad for the trip to Stoke. I wonder whether Josh Key has been ill or something. I'm just speculating at this point, but it seems very weird that he would almost just be not called upon at all.
Well, I don't think he was that catastrophic to not be
I don't,
out of the squad completely.
I mean, he's been poor, but so is everyone, really.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why we're looking for a new manager.
We have one in 8.
Yeah, exactly. We've lost 8 of our last 10 games. Yeah. No one's coming out of that with pass marks. But, I mean, the defending from us, again, set pieces.
Oh, it was a complete howler. And the fact that the man who was, ultimately the architect of set pieces is now in charge of this club.
That does concern me.
Yeah.
As you say, we've sort of, I mean, we've been rotten at set pieces for the past month or so, and since this little run began, and now the man who's sort of the architect of our set pieces is being rewarded with a top job, at least on a caretaker basis.
Very strange, isn't it?
It is,
There aren't
yeah.
many clubs like us with just so much drama going on 24/7.
Oh,
You
it's
know,
never
just stuff
dull.
like this.
Yeah, it's
You know,
never
this is
dull.
only a Swansea City thing. We have been awful from set pieces recently.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, terrible. When was the last time we scored a set piece?
No,
that
I
is a
know.
row. The last one I can genuinely remember, there's definitely been one since, was Bristol City at home. Yeah, that was ages ago.
there's
So we've definitely scored one or
Darling
two since.
scored against Leeds.
Leeds,
There's definitely been
yeah.
a couple since, but we haven't been.
But
good
probably
enough at
about
defending.
December was the last time we scored a
And
set piece.
Yeah, and I think you can argue of like a team that are bad at defending set pieces are always going to be quite bad at attacking them as
Yeah.
well. And I think that has sort of come to pass lots this season. And ultimately, at a level like the Championship, being good when it comes to set pieces is very important. And we've really struggled with that. I thought the Lewis Baker goal, the third goal, was sublime.
That's
Just
unbelievable
incredible.
finish. I was more impressed. We let what's his name, Joe Hun, something like that. I've no
Oh,
idea.
Bei Jun Ho.
Bei
yeah.
Jun Ho score his first goal of the season.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I mean, shoddy marking, wasn't it? But I think that goal from Baker, just to like, I always thought, like, I've always said the Selena goal was the best goal I've ever seen live. And the boy I went to the game with, he said that the Shelby goal against Villa was the best he'd ever seen live. Like, I think that changed on Saturday, really. I think, I mean, there's an angle which I'd recommend to anyone to go and watch. It's depressing given it was against us, but the angle from behind the goal,
Oh, yeah.
how far that shot started away from the goal, it was. You can't have too many complaints when you concede a goal like that, but ultimately we've conceded 2 goals from very far out in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, the Coventry one was pretty much just as bad because it was just as hard of a strike. It may have been from a closer distance, but, you know, he literally turned and hit it straight away. Like,
Yeah, I mean, you've got to ask if there is a problem with that, but I think that's probably the least of our issues right now, really. I mean, the reaction from fans at the end to both players and coaches was telling, I think, of what people thought of the performance. Obviously, I'm surprised there weren't many videos of this online. I can sort of only really say what I saw when I was there, which was almost a mob, really, I'd say, sort of gathering at the front, people just rushing down to the front to hurl abuse at the players, hurl abuse at the manager. It was clear that people were very, very unhappy. And to be honest, I think it was one of those where there was no coming back from that. I said to Ethan, who I was at the game with at the end, I said, you know, there's no coming back from that. Once
pretty
we
much
walk
over
away.
at that point, isn't it?
And I think, yeah, as I say, it felt like a moment that couldn't really be recovered from. Well, we're recording this on Tuesday night. We should have been at the fans forum tonight.
Yeah, well, obviously the plan was to record it tomorrow,
Yeah.
wasn't it? So
we were originally planning
given
to,
a day.
Yeah, to talk about the fans forum in this. That's obviously now been cancelled. What do you think of that decision? I mean, it probably is the right one, isn't it?
I mean, I predicted about a week ago, didn't I? I said realistically they'll sack Luke Williams, they'll just cancel it. It is the right one, but ultimately you just knew that Coleman was probably going to do this because you could have sacked him weeks ago if he wanted to, let's face it, but he's done it now.
It's now been pushed back until Monday the 3rd of March. I mean, do you think we will have a new manager in by then? Because I find it very
I
hard to
don't
believe.
think we will, but I think what's really sort of telling about that is an exact month since the window closed. So it closed when? February the 3rd,
February
wasn't it?
the 3rd,
So an exact month, that is a long time for people to sort of get over it. You know, the one worry for me about the forum being cancelled is that people won't forget what happened in the window, but people will sort of ease.
I think a lot of the sort of initial anger
Yeah.
about what happened, about the Grimes decision, will subside. But I think that is, you know, there's a way to ask questions at that sort of event, isn't there? But I think they should absolutely still be on the end
Yeah.
of tough questions. Nothing drastic enough to avoid tough questioning is going to change in the space of 2 weeks,
Yeah.
is it?
Well, I think the likes of Andy Coleman and that, you know, they shouldn't be too worried about this forum now because realistically, there's a good chance we pick up a win or two before it, which would save their asses a bit
Yeah.
because fans will be in a better mood.
And yeah, of course, and you know, for better or worse, we might well have a new manager in by that point. And if we do have a new manager, and I think people will likely be a bit more relaxed and want to sort of know more about the new man than anything
I
else. But
don't think we'll have a new
I don't
manager,
think
to
we
be
will
honest.
either.
But
And I think it could be quite an uncomfortable evening for both Sheehan and Coleman.
Well, it's going to be strange, isn't it? Because Alan Sheehan's going to be in the hot seat like he is the manager. It is going to be odd to be there.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, this is under the assumption that nobody gets appointed by them, but we've seen the club, reports online that the club are in no rush to make an appointment. I find that bizarre. I really do.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of, we need a swift appointment after, as we mentioned earlier, after that Blackburn game. We've got 2 weeks on the training ground, so surely if we had someone in by the Blackburn game or close to being in by the Blackburn game, we could give them as much of that time as possible on the training ground with a full complement of players, because obviously it's not an international break, it's just Preston have got through to the fifth round.
I just think it would be completely logical to bring in a new man, because he has if he comes in the next sort of month, he'll have minimum 10 games to work with the squad in the league, get grips with the league a bit. Obviously have a chance to build some momentum, get his name out there to the fans, and then carry on into the new season.
And it just sort of brings the atmosphere of the place up as well. I think part of the problem with, ultimately, I imagine with Luke Williams in the end, was he was probably walking into training every day with the weight of the world on his shoulders, which, I mean, I get that, of course. He was a very passionate guy. It was obvious he wore his heart on his sleeve. But if the answer is then to go with Alan Sheehan till the end of the season, he was also part of that coaching staff. So the ills of what happened are still going to affect him. Whereas if we brought an external figure in, they're going to come in excited, rejuvenated. If it's somebody out of work, they're going to come in with a point to prove, having been sacked elsewhere. I really struggle to see why, especially if, and I do think we will go with somebody out of work, because we've paid compensation for the last two managers and it hasn't worked out. Last three, but obviously, Martin worked out, didn't it?
Yeah.
But the last two who haven't worked out. I can't see us going, for now down that road again. And I think we will probably go for somebody out of work, and then they come in with a point to prove, looking to rebuild their reputation. I mean, I mentioned Steven Gerrard in the thread. I don't think you would.
I think if we just quickly mention Steven Gerrard, because God, you've taken some flack on Twitter for that. What were you actually thinking behind that? Because I think I'd potentially be able to argue every point you'll make.
So the reason I will defend myself this, I had a lot of flack about the Gerrard shout. I think it was upwards of 50 comments.
It was
just slagging.
It was like 56 comments.
Yeah. Some of them were agreeing with me.
Yeah,
I mean,
they were.
About 3, but it was. Yeah, I think sort of my point with Gerrard was, I'll admit, a little bit with Lampard at Coventry. I've seen exactly what's happened there. I'll admit that can play a part.
Lazy.
But don't call me lazy. But it was like, I think somebody who the players would be excited to play under, even if just off his name.
Yeah.
I think, if you're a midfielder and you hear Steven Gerrard's coming in the door, you're immediately quite excited.
But I think if you look at his managerial career so far,
well,
he managed to win 1 in 9 trophies in Scotland. He had some in
I'm not having it. I think he did a very
He had
good
a
job.
30, but he had Michael Beale by his side for the majority of it.
And I think he'd have Michael Beale by his side.
All right,
again
well,
now,
other points. At Villa, he had 32% win rate. You chat about sort of players being, idolising him. He fell out with loads of players.
I'm not suggesting Steven Gerrard is the messiah, but I don't think he's as bad of a manager.
Where he would be a good appointment. I also think he'd probably cost us a good chunk of money. He'd be on a hefty wage. I think we could do a lot better.
Oh my God, I took some flack.
I didn't expect it to be that bad.
No,
I read the first 4 comments and they were all really positive.
Yeah.
And then I read the rest and I was like, good Lord, I just deleted it.
The first few came in, I was sat in a Wetherspoons in Newtown on the way home from Stoke.
Rough night.
Putting that post up, and the first few I had before I got in the car to drive home were really positive. People saying, yeah, good shout, nice to see someone presenting an alternative. I got home, put Twitter on, and oh my God, I had just been barreled from.
It wasn't fun. It was fun to read, I'll be honest. And I mean, even on your thread post about Steven Gerrard, somebody had put that you were using ChatGPT on it.
Yeah, I saw that. People thinking that it was AI.
If they actually read through them, I think they'd find out that is very much you.
I spent a worrying amount of time writing that, and I know a lot of it's go and check out the thread if you haven't already. But a lot of sort of mixed comments to some of the suggestions, but there's a lot of comments on the John Messina one from Portsmouth as well.
Yeah.
He'd be my dream, but
I'd honestly just do it just to derail them completely.
Yeah, it would never happen.
But
sadly.
yeah, no way.
We play Blackburn on Saturday at home.
We do.
And we have a great record against teams in the top 6 this season. We've played 8 matches against teams currently sitting in the top 6. 1 draw, which was courtesy of a Joe Allen header in the last minute. And, I mean, I'm sure that's a regular source of goals. And 7 defeats.
Yeah.
It's not looking likely, is it? I mean, this is another one, how we're here again, of the caretaker derbies.
It is a very strange one. And I mean, the worst part is Blackburn actually look very good under their caretaker, don't they? They have a very good squad, let's not beat around the bush of that. They've got a fantastic squad. They recruited pretty well in January. I thought they made some nice signings.
Yeah, I thought
Woodrow and Dennis. I think they're
Dennis.
really good for this level.
I mean, they've got Tyrese Dolan, they've got Mac Dargay, who scored a lot of goals this season. Also, Todd Cantwell as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we know
they've got a great squad,
what
really.
quality he can bring, and I think they have a lot of players with quality who can hurt us, especially sort of good technicians in wide areas. I mean, we are, for years, I feel like we've not been able to cope with dynamic, tricky wingers. They've got a few of them.
Not at all.
So I think we could really struggle, to be honest. I think it could be quite ugly. I've got some stats, really. They're the 5th best defence in the league when it comes to goals conceded per game. So sort of almost like if we get one, we might get a couple, because they've only got the 12th best in the league when it comes to XG conceded. So they're not brilliant at conceding one goal on its own, if you know what I mean. It's like when it rains, it pours for them.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, you would have to expect a reaction from the players in what's, as we said, sort of hopefully going to be the only game of the Alan Sheehan era, but we can't.
I think the thing is, I'm not going to sit here and say we need a reaction. We need to see something from the players, because last time we said that was Coventry and they just wiped the floor with us.
No, I know.
So
the players, if they've had so many chances to show reaction now, that this is surely going to be the time. But at the same time, I think Blackburn have had such a terrible situation with Eustace walking out. That's galvanised a reaction from
I
their
think
players.
realistically the players do have to step up and show something now, because ultimately they're playing for the fan base. They're not playing for their manager. They've lost Luke Williams, so they are playing for the fans and solely the fans. I'm sure there are plenty there who will like Alan Sheehan and that. They're not going to be like us and despise him.
No, I'm not.
But ultimately Luke Williams was their manager. Most of them came here after speaking to Luke Williams. So
I mean, I'd love a penny for the thought of Melker Vidal in all of this.
Oh God, I don't even know if we could get on to him.
A man who signed under Luke Williams and is never going to play for the man, and is going to be turning up to God knows who.
Still unaware what league he's going to be playing in as well.
Poor guy.
Agent sold him an absolute dream.
He did. I think, but we got to get behind the players on Saturday, because ultimately we have to get a result. It feels massive, because I think if we lose again on Saturday, especially if a couple of teams below us pick up points, you'd have to be really concerned.
Yeah, and I think, do you know what? I wouldn't count us out of this game, because that one result in 7 against the top 6?
Yeah, and it was a draw against West Brom.
Yeah, but I think if you look a bit more into it, we gave Leeds a very good game, we gave Sunderland a very good game, we gave Burnley a very good game. Now, discounting Burnley, the Sunderland and Leeds games, the things I'd say were comparable about them is the stadium was fairly full, and we had a good bit, of atmosphere, especially that Leeds game. It was packed, and it was loud. The stadium was rocking, as people would say.
Yeah, and you hope it might be a bit like that on Saturday, because I mean, I am a bit upset we've sacked Luke Williams, but more from the sort of perspective of I'm sad it hasn't worked out, not that we've sacked him now. But I think for a lot of people, they probably did want him out and were just happy to get him out and for Alan Sheehan to come through the door and whatnot. And therefore the atmosphere should be good on Saturday, but we've got to get behind the players. I've said it so many times. I don't think they're the best quality group of players, but they're what we've got, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to be able to sign players just in the middle of the season. This is what we've got to work with for the last 13 games. Get behind them. Yeah,
it's going to be a tough fixture, and hopefully next time we do this, we will have a new man through the door, and obviously we will, as we said at the top of this, reconvene before, because we're going to, as I said, do this every 2 weeks. We're going to reconvene before that if we do get a new man in to talk about exactly what they can bring to the role. But yeah, I think, as I say, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, we will have a new man in charge. I mean, they said the process to a point is already underway, but that you can never.
I really doubt that. I mean, you think we sack Michael Duff, it took us over a month to bring in a new manager, and especially now where, we are looking okay compared to the teams below us, so I don't think they'll be in a rush at all.
No,
It could literally be in the summer. That's what I've been sort of caveating all of my top 3 managers with, is that we'll bring them in the summer.
Well, I'm sure by the time you're listening to this, all will have changed. We might have some new names on the list. We'll have a couple of names discounted from the list, and we'll see sort of where we are then.
Signing off for the favourite line, haven't I? The famous line. Appreciate you all for watching. See you all in a bit.
See you in a bit.